wine. It's off balance.
That's so great.
She still it's okay.
Well,
So
you
they-
see, we talked about the sugar and stuff earlier. Why choose my sugar?
When we can get it from wine, then it's not so bad. Okay, so workshop 2, mind-body connection. We kind of touched on it last week when I discussed what we were going to go through in terms of the 6-week courses. Today, we're really going to focus on how our mind and our go, go, go affects our body and any pathologies or issues that we're having because of that, right? So you were just speaking about how a lot of your issues are stress-induced, right? So from personal experience dealing with everything you've had to deal with, do you have anything to add about mind body and like recognizing that aspect of your own health and how that's helped or hindered any of your treatments or progress or anything?
Not off the bat. I mean, it's just my doctor called me a functional mess.
Which I feel like we all are to some extent, right? I mean, come on.
He's like, you're just
Yeah.
a functional mess.
Mhm.
You know, you should have, but you know, when you don't have an option, you just gotta go. You know, there's nothing else you can do. Is just push yourself through it.
Yeah, and I think to some extent it is, we do have to, because what are we going to do? Kind of lock ourselves in our rooms and not live life, right? So it's really working to build better coping skills, mechanisms to help us calm down, to get us back in our bodies, to reconnect the two. I feel like we see them as two separate things that operate, well, my body's doing one thing that my mind doesn't want it to be doing, but we don't realize they're actually working in tandem constantly all the time. So if our body's doing something we don't want it to do, it's because our mind has been in places that are distracting us from the signals our body are trying to tell us, right? So our body's constantly talking to us, but do you know that the language your body speaks? And most people don't. And so I'm just a good translator because I paid a lot of money to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about, that today. There we go. So what is mind-body medicine, right? For me personally, my background's in psych, and I believe that psychology, I really believe that it's the center to healing. When people come into my office as patients and we really delve into all of their issues that they're having, I can honestly tell you that about 80 to 90% of them, the core issue is lack of coping mechanisms for emotional processing. Nobody ever says, hey, this is what anger feels like, and this is how you deal with it. Or this is what grief or sadness feels like, and this is how you process and deal with it. So what do? We create these habits, whether people have conditioned and shown us, oh, you just eat your feelings. Oh, you just drink wine, which isn't bad all the time. Things in small doses. But when your body's dependent on it, right, and you have to relax that way every night with 2 to 3 glasses, which I know a lot of people have patients like that, that can be problematic. That disassociates us from that connection. And that's really what we need to tap back into. And I think there's a lot of fear around feeling deep feelings because it's so physically and emotionally painful that we don't know what to do with it. We're not okay not being okay, if that makes sense. So it really uncovers the origins of disease linked to conscious and the unconscious mind. What are we consciously thinking and telling ourselves, and what bothered us in that interaction with that person or colleague or coworker that we just justified in that moment as it's not a big deal, but we have odd dreams about, or now that affects our relationship every time we run into that person, right? That's a mind body. We anchored that person to, ouch, that hurts, or you're rude or you're selfish or whatever, we want to label it as, and then we're bound up, emotionally speaking, which inevitably affects us physically. Okay, the things that we create when we have emotions in our body, the hormones we release, the adrenaline, the stress, everything like that, over time is degrading. So if you have that job or that boss or that relationship or that relative consistently in your life and you're always exposed to it, slowly but surely, if you don't have healthy coping mechanisms to process that emotional response, it will take up space in your physical body and cause symptoms. Okay? That person, when you think about them, you get that little pit in your stomach if anybody has that, or your heart starts racing. You have a mind-body connection to that relationship and need to process feelings that you're ignoring. Okay? So it's just about awareness. And then what kind of skill set can we build to help process that? So what we really want to do with mind-body medicine is evaluate and restore our physical wellness through aligning mental and emotional capacities and processes, okay? Because again, they're mirror images of each other, okay? In research that I found, 80% of chronic illness is all due to stress. And in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to talk about stress management techniques because they're really similar, but still unique. They're kind of like a Venn diagram where they overlap in some places and they're unique in other places. So before we talk about how to deal with stress, we're just going to first be aware that there's stress and that there's a connection, right, to our stress in our bodies. So I thought that that was a cool little graphic. Healthy mind, healthy body, heal thy mind, heal thy body, which is so true. The more coping mechanisms in terms of emotions that I create with patients and do mind-body exercises with, the more versatile they become to function in their daily life. And oh, I can deal with that butthead at work because now I feel stronger within myself to process and deal with anything. You know, I'm not taking it personally or taking it on or thinking it's a reflection of me. I can accept that that's them in their world, you know, and disassociate in that sense. How many of you feel like you take on other people's crap? Most of us, right? I mean, I know I do. That's my job, is to just let people unload around me. You know, it's really hard not to sometimes. So how do we stay healthy when we're constantly around that all the time? So moving forward, it's really simple. It's a simple concept, but it's really challenging to apply. So we're going to be healing ourselves by using our mind's capacity to affect our bodily function. If you've ever been in an anxious state, closing your eyes, sitting down, and taking 5 deep breaths, inhaling to the count of 7, holding 1, 2, 3, 4, exhaling to the count of 8, has been medically proven to regulate heart rate, to regulate blood pressure, and to lower the amount of adrenaline that's released by our adrenal glands in stressful states. 5 breaths. That's it. How many times do we stop and breathe in a day? I mean, I very rarely do, right? And I'm sure it's the same across the board here. So it's little things like that. When I say toolbox of things to be able to deal with mind-body issues, it's taking that knowledge that those 5 breaths will make you more connected to your body, more aware of what's happening in your body, and then better able to maneuver around it so it doesn't just add on. And then tomorrow, the load we carry with us to work or to that relationship or to that event is even just a little bit heavier. It's going to be a little bit lighter instead, okay? And it's over time that that load continues to get lighter to where we feel like we can function and react to what's actually happening versus processing, oh, when I was 12, my heart got broken. You know, and you're still holding on to these things that our parents did or our relatives did or breakups, deaths in the family, things like that, you know? Those are things that really deserve our time and attention, but we very rarely give ourselves space to process. So how do we do that? What does that look like? Well, first I want to educate you on the physiological link. Because a lot of people say, well, how does stress cause disease? I can just compartmentalize and say, I'm not stressed out, or go home and eat that hot fudge sundae or have a couple glasses of wine. Again, I'm not judging. I really want to make that clear.
I'm not the only one.
Because no, many people do it. And again, it's like socially, to blow off steam in moderation, to relax. Sometimes tools like that are fine and totally okay. It's creating negative habits to where our body depends on it. I can't relax without that glass of wine. That is when it becomes a problem, right? So that's why I'm bringing up that dependency issue, just because I've seen it so many times in my practice. People need that glass of wine. A lot of people smoke cannabis, right? A lot of people do recreational drugs. Food is their recreational drug. Sugar, fat, junk food, right? I have to go to the drive-thru at the end of the day. That's the one thing I get to look forward to. So you mean that out of the 16 hours a day that you're awake, you're struggling through life not looking forward to anything except for that 15 minutes of dopamine that you get released when you have that hot fudge sundae on your way home? That is a terrible quality of life. You really need to look at that, okay, and figure out how can I implement more things to create more space for me to be happy. Because when we're physically right, we're mentally right, and vice versa. Again, 2 sides of the same coin. So physiological. First, we get a reaction. That person cut me off. That person was rude or gave me a weird look, right? Then we have a thought. The thought triggers usually old paradigms, old habits. Well, that happened when I was 5 that one time, and it meant that that person was going to hurt me, so that means that they're going to hurt me now. And we do this all unconsciously. We're not even aware that we're doing it, but that's what elicits the feeling. It's not about that moment, 9 times out of 10. It's about the old stuff that you've collected over time that you're projecting onto that scenario in that moment. AKA, it's not real. It's our perception. So if we can create false perceptions, we can work to undo that and create accurate perceptions or be present with the situation that's taking place right in front of us, right? Again, it's like exercising. You're not going to get fit working out once, right? It's going to take time, but it's very possible. So physiologically, our hypothalamus reacts. We send a cue to our pituitary, which sends it to our adrenal cortex, which release the chronic stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, everything like that. Oh my God, I'm late. You know, that takes time to metabolize. In nature, do you know what zebras do after they are attacked by lions? If a herd of zebras are attacked by lions and one happens to die, the slowest one, what happens to the herd? They're shaky, they're in fight or flight, they just ran and saved their lives and lost one of their herd. So now they're slightly grieving and they're scared. Well, they go back to their watering hole, their safe place, and they shake. They physically just shake and vibrate. That's just what they do. If you've ever watched any documentary about it, what are they doing? Why? Why does nature do that? It's physically metabolizing the adrenaline that was just dumped into their bloodstream. That is how they process their feelings, right? Do we ever go under a tree and shake? Or our version of what that is? Do we cry? Do we let ourselves get angry as women? Not really. Do we journal to process it? Do we scream? Do we physically allow ourselves to move that energy in any capacity? So if we don't, what's happening to it? Where does it go? It stays in our muscle tissue. It stays in our bloodstream. It stays in our organs, causing degradation. I mean, that stuff, adrenaline is meant for us to save our lives. That's limbically our cue. You are going to die. A tiger is chasing you. When in reality, she just said something mean and it hurt my feelings. So what do I do with that? What does that look like, right? So it's developing the shaking under the tree, if you will. You have to find what your shaking is for you. Sometimes it's just eliciting the cry, bringing the cry on, even if that means having to think of things that are painful or uncomfortable. But if you do that, I deemed it the ugly cry, where you're like, it's just, you're so messy and you're drooling even and there's snot everywhere. That, right? That is my shaking. That's what I need to do it at least a couple times a month. And people are like, you're kind of crazy. And like, you know, they hear it and they're like, that doesn't mean emotional stability. Well, is that fact? Or is that their judgment of healthy emotional processing, right? That's not about me. That's about them. Because I feel lighter. I've let go of that stuff. I'm not thinking about it's not keeping me up at night because I got to ugly cry and do my shaking, you know? So that's just an example physiologically of what we need to really create within ourselves and take the time to do. Otherwise, it recirculates, deposits in the tissues, degrades everything. Our cell turnover rate is slower and not as accurate, aka causing disease, right? Especially hormones. Women are the biggest for, you know, thyroid issues. Obviously, we've talked about this, menopausal issues, PMS issues. Has a lot to do with this whole, it always starts in the hypothalamus and goes to pituitary. Sometimes it goes to the adrenal cortex when we're stressed. Metabolically, these first 2 steps are always the same, whether it's to our thyroid for metabolism, to our adrenal cortex for stress, to our ovaries or uterus to produce those types of sex hormones. Those first 2 steps are always the same. They're never going to change, okay? So the first 2 steps of any sort of factory are the same. Because they overlap, that means that stress, or one facet of that pathway, is going to affect every facet of that pathway, okay? So if you notice, well, I'm just stressed out and I eat right, I don't really work out or cry or like do my version of shaking, but I eat right and I'm just not losing weight. Why aren't I losing weight? Well, what are you holding on to? What aren't you letting go of? What's getting in the way of your pathways to help your metabolism, right? To help your cycles regulate, your menopause symptoms dissipate. All of those things we have to consider. Well, we're working on you. We're working on you. So, does anybody here know the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic? Anybody? No? Okay. So, parasympathetic is rest and digest, is what it's called. Sympathetic is our fight or flight. Sympathetic, all the blood in our body rushes to our hands and our feet. We're ready to fight or we're ready to run. But either way, it's not taking up space in our brain, helping us to problem solve, and it's not taking space in our organs to help us digest and process and heal. It's out in our periphery, ready to function and react because we are on high, right? So most of us are caught in our sympathetic state constantly. And to call you out a little bit, Gail is a prime example of that. Even when she's home, she's not relaxed, thinking about work, her health, her husband's health, millions of other things just like every other woman we know, right? So how do we get her in parasympathetic? I can lead you to water, but I can't make you drink, right? So talking about mind-body things, breathing exercises, referring her out to talk to professionals who specialize in parasympathetic and getting us into a relaxed state. Well, why pay for a massage and why pay for, any other therapies that are kind of woo-woo and out there, and that's just not going to help. A lot of people have that stigma, right? But those are the therapies that put us in a state, physiological state, where healing takes place. Parasympathetic is called rest and digest. We're resting, we're digesting our food, we're absorbing our nutrients, we're fulfilling our pathways, we're releasing and metabolizing that trapped adrenaline, but we have to be relaxed. So how often are you setting aside time to be relaxed? Most people, not very often. You're on your computer or your TV or your phone right up until you fall asleep, right? So that's why last week with your sleep hygiene handout, which is in the binder, we talked about the importance of sleep, because sleep is pretty much the only time we get to be in parasympathetic in Western culture, okay? So we need really quality restful sleep to make up for the 16 hours that we're in our sympathetic state, especially if we're not taking every 4 to 8 hours these 10-minute breaks to create parasympathetic, to do the shaking under the tree. Feel free to yawn. Everybody holds it in. Did you have to yawn?
Oh, no.
Okay. I was like, okay, good. You're like talking about breathing, so let's start breathing, which we will do a little bit later. If anybody ever has to yawn, don't ever feel like you have to hold it in. I will not take it personally or think you're bored. You work hard. It's the end of the day. I get it. Okay, so stress hormones equaling damage. So how many times a day do you experience stress, if you had to guess? Even little stresses like somebody cutting you off versus large stresses, thinking about your health, your family, finances, any of that stuff. How many times, if you had to guess?
It feels like all day. It's like one stress after another. Whether it's from the time the alarm goes off, the stress starts, to you're setting the alarm for that.
So essentially, who's living your life?
Yes.
Are you actively living your life? Or are you letting your stress live your life and dictate your decisions? It sounds like a lot of us are motivated by stress and pressure and fear versus actively being proactive with our choices to feed ourselves in whatever way that looks like, that feels fulfilling on any level, right? So how can we, as soon as you wake up, first thing you can do in the morning, recenter. Okay, I'm a little stressed that I have to go to work. Ideally, I'd like to be laying on a beach. But what can we do at those small micro motions, right, to undo that chunk of stress that we've been under? These are questions I pose for you to get your wheels, because it's going to be different for everyone. Some people say, I'm just going to set a timer in my phone to remind me every 2 hours to take 5 minutes to breathe. Everybody's got 5 minutes here and there. And if you say you didn't have time, then you're just not prioritizing yourself, and it's making excuses, really, because, come on, we can all find 5 minutes. Especially if it's to help our health, This is long-standing problems. People are overweight, they're sick, they're managing symptoms rather than healing themselves. They're miserable. You guys, It's all these have to do's versus what do I get to do today? What do I want to do today? But no, it's what do I have to do? And it's everybody else I'm giving my energy to. I'm the last person I think of. And we really need to switch that role around. Because if we don't pay ourselves first, energetically speaking or emotionally speaking, how do we have anything to give other people? It's a direct reflection of our relationships. Well, they did this, and then they said that, and then they didn't do that. Well, is it about them? Is it really about them? Or is it about us? Because chances are, if we were happy, if we were healthy, if we had stable blood sugar, if we felt good in our body and our own skin and had our security and confidence, would that stuff really bother us as much? Probably not. So on average, the average woman has micro moments of stress 800 to 1,200 times a day. Just so you're aware, okay? So what do you do to undo even one of those things? One of those micro moments of stress. What are we doing? Again, rhetorical, just meant to make you think. Self-reflect. Get to know your own processes a little bit more. And again, what do you think the cumulative effects of all that are? All those micro contusions happening without any healing taking place. And it's the same thing day in and day out for years and years. What does that look like in our body? So how do we undo that? This I thought was really cool, and I just wanted to show you. If anybody's seen this, these are thermal scans of emotions in the body. So temperature and blood flow is what they monitored when they had people elicit certain feelings. So you can see right away, happiness is the most powerful in terms of creating blood flow and creating well-being, right? So the more yellow, basically, the more balanced. You can tell depression, right? Nobody's getting any blood flow. They're emotionally depressed and they're physically depressed. Their body is not circulating what it needs to circulate. And then you wonder why, when you're depressed, if you isolate yourself, why does that cause more depression? Why doesn't that make it better? Because it's creating more stagnation, more pain, more suffering. Yeah. So I thought that this was really great. If you've ever experienced anxiety, anger, okay? Anger especially, a lot of people say, I just clench my fists, I just don't know why, it's just what I want. Again, it's limbic. Anger is a form of sympathetic state. We don't want to run from anger, we want to fight, the fight or flight. That's the fight, right? So just so you can kind of see, and you should have it in your printouts as well, I think it's really interesting to see there are actual physiological reactions to certain emotions. There's a direct correlation. It's not like fear degrades the lungs because it's about chi and energy. It's like there's a direct circulatory, physiological, anatomical process going on every time you're stressed out. So we're going to do a little activity. If everybody wants to bring out that guy right there, the mind-body connection worksheet. Yeah. So it's not meant for you to, there, in the slideshow online, there's a link to the interactive one. It's more just for the body outline. Don't worry about the words right now.
It's not your time.
Oh.
Sorry.
Anybody else?
Sorry.
Okay. So, what we're going to do, so I'm going to have everybody, not right now, I'll explain it a little bit and then we'll go into it. I want everybody to close their eyes when I say so and think of a mildly stressful situation, okay? Not, the death of a loved one or a major divorce or breakup. We don't really want anyone falling apart, although that'd be okay and I'd hold the space. That does happen. But something like traffic or a deadline or pressure that you feel at work or in a relationship, something that's maybe on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of stress, right around a 4 or 5, okay? Maybe a 6. And then what we're going to do is you're going to replay those events in your mind and you're going to let your body just coax that feeling that you've been suppressing relating to it to come up to the surface, and you're just going to be aware of what happens. How does your heart feel? Is it racing? Did it slow down? Do you feel sick to your stomach? Do you feel dizzy? Are your hands warm? Do you get clammy? any and every sensation you have when you bring that up. And then as soon as we sit in it for a good 90 seconds to 2 minutes and you are fully aware of what's happening, we're going to draw out on the little bodies where you feel it. Do your shoulders tense up? Does your back hurt? Anything, any physical sensations whatsoever. So we can kind of start to observe, okay, when I concentrate on this stressful situation, this is how my body physically reacts, okay? Just a self-awareness exercise. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so close your eyes. Sit back in your chair. Feel grounded and comfortable. Feel the chair supporting you as you sit there. Take a deep breath in for me. And exhale. Now bring to the forefront a recent situation, scenario, or experience that you had a stressful reaction to. Think of the person or the circumstances, the story around it, what they said, what you said. Focus on the feeling of that stressor. Really involve yourself like you were there again, live in that interaction. Note what's happening in your body right now as you think of this. Your head, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, hands, your back, your chest, your stomach, your hips, your legs, your feet. You're really stressed out because of this. You can't figure out a solution. That person just did something, or that situation that you just can't control. Why is it happening to you? Why you? This isn't fair. And where is it evoking in your body? Just a few more seconds. Okay, everybody come back into the room. As soon as you open your eyes, I want you to start filling out that little guy. Color it in, circle it, hash lines, X's. Where did you feel it? And what intensity did you feel it at? And everybody listening at home, feel free to take a minute and pause to do the exercise yourself. I'm just going to come around and take a peek if that's okay.
Oh, no, that's okay. We'll talk about if you're having trouble invoking stuff. So where in the body? You can circle or exit, yeah.
So I noticed a lot of people had shoulder tension, huh? It's a big one. I know that's big for me. I clench and grind. Been working on that, but yeah, it's pretty common. Okay, so we're just going to discuss some results. So I love that happened to you because we get to talk about it now. So I'm trying the body scan exercise, but I'm not really feeling anything. What's wrong? Okay, so it's going to take us, for some people, several tries before you can open up that connection. You've probably gotten really great at shutting it off because it's happened so much over time. And a lot of us are in our daily lives.
Reprogram
something.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Desensitize yourself, justify why it's not a problem when it is.
Yeah, not very high strung or stressed out type person,
Oh.
so it's real hard for me to.
Connect to that.
I think your neck and shoulders, you and I had talked about
Yeah.
your neck and shoulders are very
I
good.
just didn't do it now.
Did you have a?
I actually was getting anxious when you were telling us what to do, like
Oh.
giving us the instruction, because I was anticipating it, and that stressed me out more than. And then you said, "Okay, now take a deep breath," and then it was all done.
Oh.
So then, when you did the actual exercise, it wasn't working for me. Just like her, I can compartmentalize stuff. So I'm like, I can think about something. I'm like, well, I already dealt with that, and
That's great feedback. Okay.
So then I remember, I just started thinking about how you were telling me what we were going to do.
Like when we were doing the directions.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Like-
tap back
like
into.
anticipation,
Okay.
you're like, you're going to think about something really stressful, and I'm like,
No. Uh-huh.
So that's just what I wrote down, was like the description of it, not
Good.
the actual. Because after you told us to take a deep breath for her.
You released it.
Oh, yeah, it was
Okay.
gone.
I was just trying to clear the mind to get you tapped into the stressful event. But yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of everybody is different, right? So that deep breath helped you release it. Where other people were probably like feeling what you had felt the anticipation of right before the deep breath. Maybe we're feeling it after the deep breath, like, okay, now I gotta bring it on. I don't wanna stress myself out on purpose.
Yeah,
But
just
I guess
like
I will
on
just
my
to
side,
see.
Maybe we shouldn't do this. Yeah, all of that.
I love it. Okay. So what I noticed the most going around was shoulder tension. So just so you are aware with mind-body interplay, when we have shoulder and neck tension, it's symbolic of feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders. Feeling like it's all up to us. Feeling like everything's our responsibility. And if we want it done and we want it done right, we have to do it. We can't count on other people to do it. So that's what shoulder and neck tension is. Some people get lower sacrum pain, and that's a lot of fear. It's limbically we're linked to when we still had tails, right? If you don't believe in evolution, hopefully this isn't offensive. But from what research has shown, when we had that, we have to tuck the tail like a dog who's shamed. So when we're shamed or we feel guilt or pressure like we are always wrong or doing something wrong, we get the tail tuck syndrome. And so our lower back will hurt a lot of times, right? If we have anxiety in our chest and constriction there, that's a lot of unprocessed sadness, creating anxiety because it's unfamiliar and it's scary. So there are ideals of different areas of the body experiencing pain representing a kind of a larger theme, right? So it's not about that person or that interaction I had you think about. It's about the pattern that all of you seem to have a theme of the pressure. So the stressful situations, it's probably all, if I had to find a common link between getting caught off in traffic is totally different than having a deadline at work is totally different than my marital issues. But when we strip away the circumstances and the stories behind all of them, the root core feeling of every one of those scenarios is the pressure and the have to, right? And the tension behind all of those issues. Does that make sense? So you really want to try and find the theme because, again, root cause, that's how you treat it, is uncovering that core issue. So if yours is a lot of worry, a lot of fear, a lot of anger, sadness, a lot of times it's a mixed bag, but one tends to be more prevalent than another, right? And they kind of all hang out together. So what's the leader of the pack, if you will, and how to address that? So it's really, the exercise is totally different than the dissociative coping mechanism. So for you, you say that you are relatively relaxed and laid back, but then she just said, well, we've talked about it and you have shoulder and neck tension too, right? So that's just a little awareness that we feel that we're relaxed in life, but our body's still trying to tell us, I'm not as relaxed as you think, right? Our mind may convince us that we're more relaxed than our body's actually experiencing. So you're definitely more, relaxed than the average Joe, let's say, who's super high strung all the time, but there's still something going on that deserves acknowledgement, and deserves, hey, get off my back, get off my shoulders. I don't want the weight of the world there anymore. You know, that's the body just speaking to us. So again, decoding those messages is really all these exercises are for, is getting you connected.
What about your hands? Like years ago in a job that I used to have, I was really stressed, and I didn't see myself as being stressed, but my hands would break out really bad, like almost like blisters.
Oh no.
And it wasn't like eczema. Like I did go to a doctor, I got some, but it's almost like where you wanted to work, and it was in the summertime, you know, in Phoenix. So it's like not like you wearing gloves, you know. And it was weird though because it wasn't like my whole body or anything, and it doesn't really happen to me anymore. So I think I still kind of have a stressful job, but I don't know if I just handle it better now. But to me, that I think it was a stress trigger, and then it was like, holy crap, I must be really stressed, and I don't see myself as being stressed.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good feedback. So usually hands is tactile. I don't feel connected. I can't connect or grasp. I can't hold on. I'm isolated. Does that make sense? Like you can't reach. It's very symbolic when you correlate body areas of pain into our reaction, because again, it's limbic. So that is something to consider on top of the fact that two things. You could have repressed it to the point where it's, remember that disease timeline we talked about last month or last week, where it was like this started, then it turned into this, so I no longer have that, but now I have something else, and now I have something else, but I don't have those two things. So that could have been a first line of defense of your body, like, hey, I'm stressed out. So either you got better at dealing with stress, your body repressed it and pushed it down even further and created new symptoms that are different. You changed your diet or became healthier and was eating something that was triggering a sensitivity reaction mixed with the high stress, which degrades immune function and our ability to absorb and things like that. So we have even more severe reactions. So you're watching Naturopathic Live right now, because this is like if you were a patient and you had that question, I'd say, well, let's dig deeper. I mean, I could give you something for that, and I'm sure other doctors did, or I could just say, oh yeah, it's this connection, so work on that.
Well, yeah, I used like a cream
But,
and stuff, but that didn't seem to like really help. You know?
Because it's not causative, right? It's not the root cause.
Yeah.
It was just managing a symptom.
Yeah, well, I used to run a Blockbuster video store, so I was the manager of that. Well, you're open almost 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't have, you schedule, and so I'm sure it was that type of a stress. And it was like in the summertime. I think my grandfather had, recently passed away, or so it was a couple of.
Gosh, you had a lot going on.
Weird. It was like in June, and it was just like, what the heck? And I had to go to a meeting, and so like, oh,
yeah, you're like
table
embarrassed
like
to
this,
shake
and you're
hands,
like, oh my
and
gosh,
yeah.
yeah.
And to me, that signals, knowing what I know anyway, if you are a patient of mine, that is your body's defense of like, if you are so embarrassed that you can't even reach out to shake somebody's hand or write in front of them, that's your body like, take space, separate, relax, please stop doing this to me, please. I'm so desperate that a lot of times, unfortunately, aesthetically is when people take notice. Oh, I've gained weight. Oh, I have more wrinkles. Oh, I'm breaking out. Oh, I have a rash. What are other people going to think? Then that's motivation to get well, right? So our body has this great way of pushing stuff out on the surface when it's last-ditch effort. It's desperation by the time it gets to the skin. Because we have so many other filtering organs, like our liver and our kidneys, our blood, our lymph, that if it's on the skin, our body is really upset with us. So hopefully you heeded its advice or signals.
Well, I think I can separate work from my regular life now a lot.
Good.
At that time, I lived with my brother, and he was like, I don't care about how your day went, And so maybe that was part of it, because it's like, I kind of learned to leave work at work. And when I leave work now, I really don't think about it. Every once in a while, I might wake up in the middle of the night, or I'm driving home going, oh crap, I forgot to do that. And I'll just call and leave myself a message so I can be done with it.
That's smart.
Myself a note. Yeah.
That's really
I
great.
just call and leave myself a voicemail and then I can just leave it behind. And so.
Great technique. See?
We need to learn how to do that.
Gail, you'll walk into work with like 30 messages. Uh-huh.
I feel like you bring your work with you.
Yeah.
Then you get to work and then work next day.
I don't crap, my phone's lit up.
Yeah, I hate seeing the business lights first thing in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Then you look at the phone number and you see it with your cell phone.
It's not as big. I think I might actually use that tool. I really like that a lot. I usually just type notes and link it to an alarm, but it sounds easier to just leave a
I've been
voicemail.
driving home and go, oh crap, I forgot to do that. I'm calling myself.
That's smart. You should do
Yeah,
that.
we should do that.
You really should do that. So Why should I try the worksheet for other emotions like anger and fear? So we talked about stress a little bit. Stress can be different for different people. Some people are more stressed out dealing with sadness because they don't know how. Some people are, it's more uncomfortable to deal with anger or frustration because they're not sure how. So this sheet, which there is a link in your PowerPoint, I totally urge you, again, this will be on YouTube tonight, click on the interactive one, because then you can kind of see different emotions in different places. And I really urge you to, as a home assignment this week, take the time to do an angry stressor, a frustrated stressor, a sad stressor. And then you can understand the difference with how your body reacts under different circumstances, because it's usually not the same reaction to everything. It can be, like maybe you'll have the shoulder tension in every feeling, but maybe with anger your hands clench, where with sadness your heart aches.
There's this worksheet here.
Yeah, and you can have a live interaction one where you click it, and yeah, it's a really great little tool. That's just a terrible electronic version. But again, we were just looking for the body representation more than anything to be able to, so people at home, if they're listening, can do the interactive one versus the written one in the journal or the binder. So stress, anxiety, anger, fear, they all turn on that fight or flight. We're talking about sympathetic state. Sympathetic state creates cortisol and adrenaline. We don't do anything to shake under our tree, so it just adds up and accrues and accrues. Okay, so there are two types of emotions I want you to be aware of, primary and secondary. Does anybody, well, I guess it's already up there. Give it away. Is anybody familiar with the differences before seeing it up here? No? Okay. So primary is like our initial reaction. It's almost like our intuition or our gut instinct about something. We haven't even formed like a cognitive thought, but we're already having a reaction. So that's primary. That's limbic. You can't really do a whole lot to control that. Secondary is how we react to that emotion. So I feel sad. That means you're mean because you hurt my feelings. That's my secondary. My primary is sadness. My secondary is the judgment I apply to the primary. Does that make sense to everybody? So primary we can't really change. We don't have a lot of control over our subconscious limbic system. What we can reframe and what we can influence is the secondary reaction or the judgment or conditions we put on that feeling. Okay? That's where the toolbox comes into play, is working on that secondary feeling. And over time, what that does is actually realign our neural connections and nets to shift the primary. So we're indirectly affecting primary. Does that make sense? We have to access primary through secondary. Secondary is like the gatekeeper. It takes more and more time, but I can honestly tell you the people that I work with reframing and connecting with the secondary, I see exponential improvement in primary reactions. They no longer walk in front of a crowd of people to give a presentation and their primary response was that fight or flight, shaky, I can't do it. Their secondary response, I'm going to fail, I'm terrible, I can't do this in front of people, right? So we worked on the secondary, you can do it, you are great, people make mistakes and it's okay. What's the absolute worst that can happen? You vomit in front of everyone or pee your pants and life goes on, right? So by reshifting the secondary and living through the worst case scenario, realizing that you're still going to be alive and have your loved ones and have your health to some extent for most of us and have all of these basic things in life, it doesn't really define you. It's just this fear that we've made bigger than it should be. By reframing that, the primary is now, I can walk in front of a crowd of people as my job to train 50 people at a time and not get anxious. So by addressing the secondary and working to reframe that and shine the light on that monster, the primary shifted. Does that make sense for everyone? Yeah, it's a pretty easy concept. And you're also smart. Okay, how will knowing how stress affects the body help me? So when we understand how the thoughts directly impact us, then that's really the first step in understanding our physical body. That's why we did the exercise. Okay, so we can kind of make that connection and correlation. I urge you to read this. It's really tiny, but please go online when this is on YouTube and check it out. So shoulder area, burdens, carrying a heavy load, the weight of the world, right? Our anger center are on our sides, also in our hands as well. Heart center, grief, sorrow, sadness, emptiness, loneliness. I feel helpless. I feel embarrassed and shameful. I've repressed long-standing emotions. Let's see, survival center, our sacrum. What if we have pelvic pain or pelvic issues? right? Well, what does that constitute? Feeling that we won't survive, life-threatening, like you're actually worried for your safety. I see a lot of hip dysplasia in women like that, pelvic inflammatory disease, issues with am I safe? People who unfortunately have suffered very large traumas, especially rape and things, they hold all of their pain and tension and emotional center here because that area of their body is no longer safe. Those correlations and things make sense? This is our old stuff. Center, childhood conditioning, violations of our personal space, our body, especially as women. I'm sure all of you here, catcalls, being treated or objectified, right, just because of our gender. A lot of women can hold, I get nauseous around big groups of men. Well, why? What is that feeling really eliciting here? What is that really about? It's not just like, oh God, thank God that's over. Okay, moving on to the next distractor. It's like, no, that experience you just had is taking up space in your body. What are you going to do about it? Justify and compartmentalize, or really allow it to metabolize so you can move forward? You know what I mean? And having 80 or 800 to 1,000 micro stressors a day seems like a lot to undo, but we don't have to really delve deep into each one of them because, again, it's finding the theme. Out of 1,000, 700 were about, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to take care of my kids? How am I going to take care of my husband? How am I going to take care of my health? How am I? Weight of the world on your shoulders, right? So how can we address that one big issue to undo half of those 800 to 1,000 issues that took place that day? Starting to make sense? Yeah? No? Maybe? So what can we do to help? How do we help ourselves? Who here exercises regularly? At least 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. Nice. Big reason why she's probably relaxed, right? What kind of exercise do you do?
Cardio, muscle endurance classes.
Great.
Spin.
See? That's nice. All of those things you just described are shaking under the tree. That's great. Does anybody, so for those of you who don't exercise regularly, what is the biggest issue? Raise your hand if it's time. Raise your hand if it's energy. So usually both. Okay. So the time issue is a barrier that a lot of people have. And that's just really about putting yourself first and committing. Because if you find time to stress out about work and you find time to watch TV or go online and peruse Facebook and stuff, like those are wormholes of time, right? Imagine if you just took 30 minutes of taking away from that thing and applying it to yourself. So I think we really do all have the time. We just justify that we don't. Energy is a real issue. Fatigue is a real issue. If you don't have the energy to work out, how are you supposed to work out? And is that making you more fatigued rather than helping your fatigue? And where does that fall and how do I do that? So I might as well just not start altogether, right? Well, the good news is exercise actually breeds more energy. It will it'll make you in the short term more fatigued, but by metabolizing the adrenaline and releasing endorphins, you're actually creating a healing environment internally for the body. Okay, you're increasing blood flow, oxygen to the brain, to the body organs. Circulation is really big for energy production. So it's like I'm too exhausted to work out, and I'm not going to work out because I'm too exhausted. Well, we just have to do it. So 5 to 10 minutes at a time is where I would recommend you guys starting. Walking around the office, just up and down the stairs 5 times a day if you can. Go as slow as you need to or as fast as you want to. Gentle things like swimming to take off the pressure of gravity on our joints and our body. Very gentle yin or restorative yoga. I know some people are like, yoga, please give me a break.
It's coming soon.
I did it for the first time this past year, and I loved it.
Isn't it great?
I loved it, and I have a friend that just started teaching this past year. I do aerial yoga,
Oh, that sounds fun.
And I do Pilates because of my joints and stuff, so everything I do is kind of low impact and I stretch. And I have a Pilates right in the living room, dining area.
So you have to walk
and
by
my
it.
swing is hanging right there, so if I watch TV, I'm watching TV upside down a lot of times.
See?
So,
That's great. We're all about multitasking, especially as women. That's perfect. If it's in front of you, you're more likely to do it more often, right? Oh, I'll schedule a class. It's outside of my house and I have to make the effort to drive there. You're less likely to have success. That's for further. That's like future. I'm already motivated. I feel good. I have energy. I've been working out, right? So what are some small, tiny steps? Because exercise if you can see, food is the most widely abused anti-anxiety drug in America, because it is, especially sugar. And exercise is the most potent but underutilized antidepressant. It's so true. We have to move our bodies. What's stuck stays stuck, what's moving stays moving, right? Newton's law. I really urge you, more than anything that we talk about or any of the cool assignments that you get, whether you apply them or not, if you really are not happy with your physical state and your energy level, please take 10 minutes a day for yourself. Move your body. I don't care if that's laying on the ground, rolling side to side for 10 minutes. Anything is better than this all day and then this at home, right? It really is. You have to start small. It's the tiny, tiny successes that breed the large-scale goal accomplishment. It's not lose 40 pounds by next month because that's what you think you should do or want to do. It's no, what can I do right now in this moment? I'm going to consciously drink water. I'm going to take 5 deep breaths. I'm going to roll around like a 5-year-old on the floor. Talk about emotional integrity. I have never seen somebody more bipolar, quote unquote, those of you at home, than a little kid, a 4-year-old, right? They're crying and they're screaming and they're angry and then they're happy and they're excited and curious and then they are ticked off and then they're sad again. They don't know why. And they're so in their emotional integrity. They feel the feeling as they feel it and fully express it to that extent. And then they move on to the next thing. But not as adults, because we're robots. We're supposed to have manners, and emotion is weakness, and all of these judgments. That secondary emotion, right? The primary starts coming up. Secondary justifies why it's not okay. So if all else fails, just be your 5-year-old self again. Tap into that person, because that's more authentically you, I'm sure, than the version you've created that's here in this room seeking out help because you're not completely happy, right? I think that to me is the most fun too, because then you get to run around and play, and who doesn't love that? So mind-body therapies, there's a plethora. I'm like, look at the list. Have you tried any of these things? Aromatherapy, we're doing, I think, right now. Especially me. I'm right by it. A lot of you do oils, right? That's huge. That's so great. That is so great. It is smell, the strongest association say that 10 times fast. Association to memory and to limbic emotions. Is that in oil now?
Bach flowers.
Nice. Okay. Bach flowers are great.
Olives?
What does it smell like?
Like good alcohol?
No, it tastes like it tastes and smells like
You're
alcohol.
supposed to taste?
Like
You put it
reminiscent?
underneath your tongue.
Oh, no, I hate
Dissolves.
olives though.
You don't taste olive. You taste
It probably tastes more like alcohol than
Alcohol.
olives. So the reason why most botanical remedies are in alcohol is because the constituents of the plant are alcohol soluble, meaning that the alcohol is what can saturate the active ingredient and pull it into the fluid, making it a medicine. Others that are fat soluble, you'll see, they tend to make or glycerate soluble, so sugars and fats absorb the constitution or the constituents. Then you'll see different makeup. So a lot of times there'll be like a buffer in it. They'll add oils and make it a capsule rather than a tincture that you take as a liquid, things like that. So that's usually why the base is alcohol.
I did too.
If anybody has any issues, history of alcohol dependence or, in AA, obviously that's anonymous, keep it to yourself, but there are other options for teas, water therapies, oral supplements if tinctures don't work for you. But tinctures are really one of the fastest ways to deliver medicinal botanicals to our body. So yoga's on here. I know a lot of stuff that looks weird, but it works. Yeah? She said she's done weirder stuff. So what weirder stuff?
Well, I do. I've done tea treatments.
Okay.
Which is the Korean method.
Mm-hmm.
I do Tanai massages, and I do that.
That sounds cool. I do not know what that is. I've heard of Ki, but I haven't heard of Tanai.
Maybe I'm saying it wrong. And I also have done rolfing.
Rolfing is great. Does anybody know what that is? No? So Between our muscles, we have these little thin filaments encasing everything called fascia. Fascia attaches muscle groups, compartmentalizes muscle groups to work together. It basically is more or less meant to be a lubricant between things moving. But what happens is fascia gets hardened because we don't move. Again, what we don't move stays stationary, right? So Ida Rolf, a German woman, said, let's just melt and pulverize that fascia to get the knots out of the muscles, to get the range of motion back in all of our joints, to lower inflammation and pain and stimulate the immune reaction to help healing. So it's relatively painful sometimes, but they go into the insertion and origin of the muscle where the fascia is its deepest, and they will pulverize that area to create space and, again, blood flow, oxygen. So it's like the deepest form of massage you can possibly get. And a lot of times it happens with active and passive motion. So the therapist will have it on the origin or insertion, let's say, and they're passively moving your arm for you. And then they drop your arm and say, okay, now you actively do it yourself to see what we're engaging and what we're not. And a lot of times, like for me, I'll roll, and then it'll click and it catches and then it falls, right? And do that with your hips. Do that rotating. Do that with your neck. It's like fine, ouch, right there. Okay, so I know my fascial line at that point of movement is stuck. And again, weight of the world on your shoulders, right? So it's a really great way to undo a lot of the damage that working out alone won't do. Rolfing, structural integrity, realignment, massage, physical body work, you guys, is so important. Get back in our bodies. We live here, right? Let's ground into here. Because again, that's health. Not what do we have to do today, what do we get to do today? And who doesn't want to look forward to like self-care hour? You know? Come on. You deserve it. You guys work too hard. So now we're going to do progressive muscle relaxation. We're going to actually apply it so you can kind of experience it for yourself. Okay, it's supposed to relax you. If anybody is uncomfortable or not wanting to do it, totally let me know. That's fine. You all have, freedom of choice. I'm not going to make you do anything. But otherwise, I'd really love for you to, if you have to pee, go pee. If you want water, get water, because we're going to take the next 10 to 12 minutes to really get back into our bodies and do some releasing, okay? Anybody not ready? Okay? All right, let's do this. So I'm going to turn it on and hit start.
If you guys want to eat after this, please help yourself.
I'm not sure why. Can you see that? No, you can't see that. I'm going to see if the recording is what is not allowing this audio to come up. So hang on just a second for me.
Put it online.
Really? Okay, great. Anybody else have not a good experience? So just for those at home, taking a second, sorry. We just took a break to do the 10 minutes of mind-body connectivity with the progressive muscle relaxation, and now we're getting some feedback. So anybody not like it or feel uncomfortable doing it? Does everybody feel a little bit more relaxed?
Great.
Yeah? So those are the types of things that when I say shaking or paying ourselves first or happy, healthy habits like last week, that's what I mean. Things like that. It took 10 minutes. And most of us kind of undid a lot of our day right there, believe it or not. So those are the little toolbox that, those are the things in the toolbox I'm talking about to apply in our daily lives to help us. And YouTube is amazing. They're all free. There's thousands of videos, whether it's that, breathing, meditation, visualization, guided, talking us through emotions, any and everything, yoga, relaxation yoga, restorative yoga, 5-minute yoga, 3-minute breathing exercises. It's all there for you to use, and it's completely free. Okay, so I really urge you to. That's part of your homework this week, if you choose to accept. So stay with it, okay? This is the biggest issue I get is it's not working the first or second time, so I'm just going to stop. I know this way of life works for me. I'm not super happy or healthy, but it's more comfortable than having to change everything at this stage in the game. So the biggest thing that I can tell you is to support yourself through this process and just stick with it. Chisel away a little at a time. It's really going to have such an aggregate effect for your health. It's going to be so good, not only physiologically, but mentally and emotionally. After today, doing things like today, you're going to be able to react to stress better, to help reframe those secondary reactions to, or secondary emotions and reactions to situations. So being present with what is. We don't want to loop into the story and how could they and why did they. It's like, what's the core feeling here? It's abandonment. It's sadness. It's neglect. It's anger. It's not anybody else's fault. It's not the story who did it. It's coming from us. So we're the ones who are responsible to feel it so that we can heal it. And then it really exponentially and positively affects our health. The mind and the body are like parallel universes. Anything that happens in the mental universe must leave tracks in the physical one. I find that to be pretty impactful for me. Unlike food, emotions require conscious awareness to be properly digested, absorbed, and eliminated. Just like our food, emotions need the same thing. So we do this part. We're not digesting or breaking them apart, and we're not eliminating or letting them go. We're absorbing them, and they stay with us. And that's what causes disease. So how can we work to bring it all together? So week 2, again, rhetorical, just planting seeds for you to think about. How many of you kept your daily life log this last week? Or kind of sort of tried to? Okay, what'd you think? Did you find out anything new about yourself? See any patterns? Notice any issues that you feel comfortable talking about while recorded?
I've been doing it for a while, so it's hard for me.
Anything new come up for you this last week? Okay.
Not really. No.
Anybody who didn't keep it, what are some of the challenges with keeping it that you've noticed? Just no interest, no time, not wanting to say.
A couple of them only got it today.
Oh,
So,
okay.
like, I had 2 days there.
Well, this will be your homework for next week. This week, if
So
you
this
shall,
is the-
if you so choose and accept.
But in looking at it, it's one of those things of accountability.
Exactly.
I'll be totally honest, I didn't do it.
Okay.
Um,
I'm glad. That's what we need.
mine
That's
was probably more fear of what I would see.
And
Okay.
it's personal too, it's not, you don't have
Yeah.
to share this with anyone.
I know,
You
but
can hide this.
so
I
what
can hide things from myself pretty well.
so what is it about seeing yourself for who you are that scares you?
Exactly that. I mean,
Well, what
there's
about
just-
that? Yeah.
There's just so many, I don't know. There's just so many things that I know are there, I just don't wanna put down on paper. I don't wanna admit to them, admitting to something is the first step, but
To change, really.
to change, I know, and a positive change, but a possibly hard change as well, so.
So are you comfortable right now with your current state of health, mental, emotionally, or physically? Okay.
And
So
I know that,
no, I know you know.
that that's not something I wanna stay with, it's just.
So if
taking
you
that
don't
step
want to
do
stay
it.
with it or track it to change it, is there anything for you personally that will make you feel safer tracking it or bringing that awareness so we can get to the first step of the awareness creating the change? Like-
I would say I'm more aware of, I did it more mentally than on paper.
That's the step.
I mean,
That's worth celebrating.
That's kind of what I thought. I'm like, I'm not gonna put it on paper quite yet.
You got to start somewhere.
I don't know who's gonna see that. And
Oh, I am not collecting.
even-
They are
no,
not
no,
graded.
Not even here. Like, I could have it at home, and granted, my kids, my whole family's in California, but I could have it at home, and my daughter pick it up and be like, "Really, Mom? That's what your food looks like."
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm not quite ready to have that happen. And I think that's probably like one of my fears is, okay, okay, well, I kind of know some of these things, but once I put it down on paper, like it's on paper. And
Well,
somebody
it's
else
real
can see it.
regardless. And it's real and it's your life regardless of if it's on paper or not. I avoid looking at my bank account sometimes because I don't want to see how low it is. But regardless of if I check my bank account or not, it's going to have $24 in it.
Right.
Right? So bringing awareness to it initially is very anxious for me, and I get frustrated and overwhelmed. But it's at that point when I have the emotional reaction that okay, well, if I don't want to have this be the case, I don't want this to be my reality, what can I do to get angry enough or motivated enough or inspired enough or whatever it is to kick my butt into gear to take action to change that positively, right? So you're really at a crossroads, it sounds like, to continue on the path that you're on and push yourself further down, being uncomfortable in your own skin, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, all of them, or be uncomfortable for a short term in order to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. Because either way, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be afraid. You're going to be overwhelmed and scared and embarrassed and shameful. But are you going to just do it for the sake of doing it and keep hiding? Or are you going to do it in an effort to get to the other side, right? That's really what we're faced with when change happens. And fear, so cheesy but so true, false evidence appearing real. We convince ourselves that if my daughter knows what my poop looks like, I'm not a good mom. Or I'm embarrassed and shameful because I have weird poops because of what I eat, and I know I don't eat as well as I should eat, and I don't want to change that because my old habits are comfortable, but I know I have to change it, but I can do that next month or next week or next year. And that slippery slope, back again, it's justification. It's giving us reasons why we shouldn't prioritize ourselves. And our ego has a great way of creating barriers that look this tall but are really this big. So your daughter sees what kind of poop you have. All right, let's talk about poop. What do your poops look like? How healthy is your intestinal tract? It's weird because it's poop, but that's a direct relation to how our body is eliminating. And how we're eliminating represents how we're absorbing, represents what we're putting in our body, is a complete representation of our actual health. So let's have an open dialogue with our kids, So that leads to kind of an uncomfortable, discussion. That's at the end of the day, that discomfort was for a reason, for a positive, impactful reason, not just to keep living on the hamster wheel, So hopefully that wasn't, too shedding the light on you, or you don't feel too,
Always leave this at work, put it in your locked
Oh,
cabinet.
right.
Locked cabinet.
Wait, okay, put it down. Not a chance. So,
Well, I believe in you.
Put it in your safe there. Or put it in code, write it in code.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we can all help support each other, right? It's like, hey, did you fill out your log today? What were your problems? What were your issues? So we can all help each other, And it's not about being like the journal police. It's just, hey, we all want to change or else we wouldn't be here. We all want to be more empowered and educated or we wouldn't be here. So how can we help ourselves and help each other? Because again, we are together. Women's empowerment, that's so important. We have to have each other. You can't do it alone. And that's probably another reason why you feel overwhelmed, is you have to do it alone, but you don't. You always have the option to ask for help. We just don't. For whatever self-judgment reasons we want. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be inconveniencing anyone. Chances are they need help too. So by you breaking the ice, asking for help, it creates this dialogue. By talking about things is when you discharge that fear and anxiety and power that we give it by not talking about it, So next thing, mind-body exercises. Everybody has a list, right, in their book. I definitely urge you, please do at least one of them this week. Just one. You don't have to do a lot, but just one of the mind-body exercises. Oh, they say relaxation, sorry.
I think it says grounding, relaxation exercise.
Yeah. So some of the handouts you'll see are grounding basics. Grounding just means being barefoot or skin to skin, skin to earth contact with the earth. People are like, why do you want to do that? Doesn't make sense. Well, the earth releases negative ions. Stress creates positive ions. So guess what? When we're overly positively charged walking around, we earth into the ground, it neutralizes our charge. Those negative ions that earth creates meets our positive and we're neutral. That's why people are like, oh, I just want to go on vacation in nature. Why do you feel better when you hang out in nature?
Or you
It's,
go to Sedona.
it's a physiological reason why. Yeah. We're actually discharging that stress. So the grounding techniques are really great. That's another relaxation technique and handout that you can do. There's a whole list of breathing and meditation and stuff like that. So I urge you to do at least one of those this week. Please, please, please. You're worth it. Even if you don't track it or write it down, just do it. Even in the car, you know?
I do a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I do too. It's like double duty.
I listen a lot.
So the last slide I want you to pay attention to, and know you have this resource on YouTube, or excuse me, yeah, this will be uploaded on YouTube. These are 3 videos I handpicked, anywhere from 3 to I believe like 15 or 20 minutes on relaxation, whether it's breathing, guided meditation, another progressive muscle relaxation. I sifted through a lot to figure out which ones I thought were most suitable for our group here, and I really love these. Feel free, if you don't resonate with them, to find one that does. But between the grounding and relaxation handout, do one of those, and then do one of these on the list, or find your own YouTube. So you have 3 things: the log to keep track of, do the grounding or relaxation activity from the handout, and find one YouTube video, whether it's from this presentation or one you choose. So if you choose to accept, that is your homework for this next week, or 2 weeks, because I'm out of town next week, and I'll be back the following week. My sister's giving birth. I'm so excited. I'm going to be an aunt.
First one?
Yes.
Oh.
This is the first one among us. We are all in our 30s officially, and first grandbaby. So super exciting, I know. And I loved it in school obstetrics. So I'm like, what's your blood pressure? Is your cervix softened? Oh gosh, this is being recorded. Yay, everybody at home gets to hear. Okay, thank you so much for joining me this week. We are good to go for today. So unless anybody has any questions or comments?
Can I ask you about sleep?
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I know I don't get enough sleep, because I maybe get like 6 hours a night, you know. And so on my chart, that was one of my things, but I thought, well, 8 hours is what you need, so I wasn't too bad. But I wear this Garmin tracker, and they did an update on the app, and it logs like deep sleep, light sleep, awake.
Yep.
So I only get like 2 hours of deep sleep a night for this thing. Is that typical?
What's going on with your sleep? Like,
Well, I don't dream, so I don't dream. I think I probably do move a lot, but I don't wake myself up.
Are you dealing with hot flash?
You don't wake up at all in the night?
Well, sometimes I wake up, but I mean, it's not, if you look at like my app, like I can show you. And I'm just like,
But only sometimes you don't wake up every night? I wake up every night, once or twice a night.
No.
no, because it's really weird, and it's just updated, and I've been kind of, I've been keeping track of that, and I'm like, so I was like, I need to try to get more than 6 hours, so I tried to go to bed a little bit earlier. But like, my deep sleep is dark, and my light sleep's the light, and like, this is last night. But I went back, and I mean, maybe every night I have like 2 hours of deep sleep.
Yeah, that should be about double ideally. It should be about half and half. So if you guys want to see an app, a lot of sleep apps are free. I use a tracker too.
That's
It's
pretty
based-
wild though.
Yeah.
It's based on movement. So you know how we switch our phone and it knows, oh, landscape versus portrait view? It has a chip in it that lets you know where it's moving and how it's moving. And so it's based on our movement, because when we're in REM sleep, we're mind and muscle. There's zero movement. We're just busy dreaming and working things out in our body.
Well, see,
So in lighter
I
sleep,
pretty much stay in one little spot.
So
it's nice, but I'll sleep on this side, I'll sleep on this side,
Track this.
somewhere on your bed, usually by your feet, or like I stick it under the sheet next to, because I sleep on one side but not the other. So it's not like under your head while you sleep, but it's on the bed, like register your movement.
I'll hit the bottom of those. Oh, just like, yeah, just like in the middle of it.
And it's free, and then you put it in your bed.
Yeah, I know the Fitbit's got it.
And the Fitbit is the same piece that's on the phone as the Fitbit, it just registers movement.
Oh, something in your phone, you can just put an app on your phone.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
It's a free app.
I know I dream. I never remember what they are, I always stupid.
So my sleep app is called Sleep Cycle.
If anybody wants to know, sleep cycle is really great because what it does is you set your alarm for around what time you want to be awake by, and it gives you a 30-minute window where it purposely alarms you at your lightest level of sleep. So you're not being pulled from your deep REM sleep. You're already kind of sort of awake and light sleeping anyway, so let's set the alarm then. So this is kind of cool. So if I want to be up by 7 o'clock, anywhere between 6:30 and 7 is when the alarm will go off based on my movement and my sleep pattern.
What's that one called?
It's called sleep cycle. And then you can look at, it registers after you keep enough track, the shortest night of sleep you had, the longest night, the best night based on ratios of deep to light, and your worst night. So
What is this app called?
sleep cycle.
So 4 hours though, of deep sleep. I think
Ideally.
these apps are pretty accurate.
This is on your arm, so
I
it's
know,
on
it's-
your phone, so it's.
Yeah.
I think.
The Fitbit is probably a little more accurate because it's moving as your arm is moving. Some people report to me that it's uncomfortable to sleep with it because it gets in their hair or they're sleeping, they sleep close to their body, so it's
I've done that, but
uncomfortable.
I've also taken it off and then attached it to something else
Oh.
other than my arm, because I tend to sleep on my arms a lot. I'm a side sleeper
Underneath
for the
the
most
head.
part, yeah, so it is irritating.
So, my best night, I had almost 9 hours, 8 hours and 57 minutes.
Was it a weekend, I hope?
Because
feel bad otherwise.
I was up till 12:40 working. That's my life, and I woke up at 9:40, just about. And you can see, so a nice rhythmic sleep is what's more important. When it gives you your stats.
Well, yeah, so that's kind of like,
Rhythmic, exactly.
I was
So-
right at it, almost at 4.
Yeah, me too.
You can see.
On vacation.
That's
nice.
You should see my worst night. I
Oh,
flatlined. I feel like I died and come back to life. So this is it. Okay,
That's the other, I don't sleep in my, because it works for me.
and it counts your steps in your sleep.
I'm trying.
So during that night, with my movement, when I was moving, I moved the equivalent of 1,400 steps.
Holy cow. Mine doesn't,
I know, I
steps
know.
while I sleep.
But if you look at, let's say, my worst night, oh God, look, I flatlined. I spiked once to pee in the middle of the night, and the rest is like, it's all deep.
Yeah.
So there is such thing as too much sleep. Like when you build a deficit, this was when I was in med school. I started tracking this year 2 in med school, so it had a lot of history for me. But you could see I flatlined and went really deep, woke up to pee and went right back to really deep.
Strike over this week, just to try, because I get up at 4.
So it's, knowing your patterns and how much sleep you're getting.
So I
And they're
got
free,
to play with
so-
the dog, play tug of war and stuff, but we had it.
All right, so we are going to officially end this recording.
45 and then
Is that sensitive enough that it will feel movements of
I'll get